with Module 3, History and Ethical Principles. I'm Jessica, and I'm here with Mary Grace and Davina, and we're just going to talk about kind of the history of some research and how that applies to a more current issue. So just a little bit of a summary of research with human subjects. So today there are a lot of laws and principles that researchers have to abide by to conduct research with human subjects. And these exist because of different studies that have taken place in the past that were not necessarily ethical. So I'll go over a few of them on this slide here. The first one would be Nazi experiments on prisoners during World War II. Nazi scientists held a lot of experiments on their prisoners, such as one learning about like hypothermia. So they subjected participants to extreme cold conditions, and they also tested treatments and antibodies for different diseases such as malaria, tuberculosis, yellow fever, and some others. And so these unethical studies led to the creation of the Nuremberg Code, which kind of served as the base for future laws and principles that were set up to ensure ethical research. We also have the Milgram experiment in 1961, which measured the willingness of subjects to subject some participants to pain under an authority figure. So to measure like their willingness to obey an authority figure, even when it goes against their own ethical principles or personal conscience. Another one would be the Stanford prison experiment, in which it was a study where subjects were placed between a guards group and a prisoners group. And this was kind of to measure these subjects' behaviors and actions based on the environment that they were put in. One final experiment would be the Tuskegee syphilis study, which took about 40 years between 1932 and 1972. So about 600 African American men were used in the study from the U.S. Public Health Service. They were said to be treated for bad blood, but they weren't really explained what they were being studied for and what were the risks of this disease that they had. About 2/3 of them actually had syphilis at the beginning. And so this was unethical for many reasons, including the fact that they didn't have access to information, so they didn't they didn't get informed consent, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit. And penicillin became widely available and used as a treatment for syphilis in the 1940s, and these subjects were not treated with penicillin at that time. And so the study only ended in 1972 when a news article came out about the study. And that kind of led to the study being reviewed and finally deemed ethically unjustified. So all these studies, especially the syphilis study, led to the creation of the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. And the commission was the goal was to create a set of rules or principles to do ethical research on humans. So that's how the Belmont Report was created in 1979, which is what we're going to talk about next. So the Belmont Report, like I said, created by this commission in 1979. There are 3 basic principles that govern ethical research that were created by this report. The first one is respect for persons. So this kind of says that human subjects must be treated as autonomous agents, and as well as people with diminished autonomy are entitled to protections. So just we're making sure that people are empowered to make their own decisions and choose of their own will to participate
participate in the research or to not participate. They can also leave the study if they desire. And we want people to have enough information to make an informed decision, as well as have the mental competence to do so. And we want to make sure they have they do this without any influence or coercion by any other parties involved. And this principle is often upheld by informed consent. It's about the benefit of the research, possible risks, what the research is about, and what the subject would be expected to do during the study, as well as usually it involves also a standard treatment that's currently used. That would be another option for them. The other principle is beneficence, which is the idea of maximizing benefits for the study participants while minimizing or eliminating any risk of harm. One example for this would be just ensuring that privacy and confidentiality of data and personal information is protected, and just making sure that benefits of the study outweigh risks. And then the third principle is justice, which is to make sure that the benefits and the burdens of the research are evenly distributed between the participants and the whole population. And we don't want to unfairly burden one population just because they're more conveniently accessible, for example, while only allowing the benefits by another population. So just kind of making sure that everything is equally and equitable between these different populations in the study. The Belmont report outlines the basic ethical principles in research involving human subjects. In 1991, HHS and 15 other federal departments and agencies codified a federal policy for the protection of human subjects, also known as the Common Rule. The latest revision of the policy occurred in 2018. The Code of Federal Regulations, Title 45, Part 46, has 5 subparts. Subpart A includes requirements for assuring compliance by research institutions, requirements for researchers obtaining, waiving, and documenting informed consent, and requirements for institutional review boards, membership, function, operations, review of research, and keeping records. Subparts B through D cover vulnerable populations, pregnant women, fetuses, prisoners, and children. Subpart D provides requirements for IRB registration. The Common Rule is the baseline standard of ethics for any government-funded research in the United States. Nearly all U.S. academic institutions hold their researchers to use statements of rights regardless of funding. The article for this week's module was published in DMJ entitled Unethical Studies of Ivermectin in COVID-19. The authors discussed the temptation for researchers to lower ethical standards in favor of during disease outbreaks. Most recently, research into using the drug to treat COVID-19 infection. Ivermectin is used to treat infections by roundworms, threadworms, and other parasites. However, initial randomized trials suggest the benefits of using this drug to treat COVID-19 infection include a reduction in inflammatory markers, a reduction in hospital admissions, and increased survival rates. Turns out the research of the drug preventing COVID-19 infection was flawed, potentially fraudulent, and unethical. Further analysis of the trials revealed biased outcomes due to non-randomized participants and non-blind studies, and it was unclear whether researchers were blinded. Medical journals retracted publications, since excluding this data invalidates the findings of the drug's potential to decrease mortality of death of COVID-19 infection. The data was duplicated for several participants. Deaths were recorded on dates before the study, and plagiarism was presented in the article. The most notable infractions involved unethical practices during experimental studies with the drug. The first occurred in Mexico City by giving 200,000 ivermectin kits to residents with COVID-19. The experiment was conducted without proper consent or appropriate ethical protection. Second, in an experiment in Arkansas jail, 4 incarcerated men developed severe side effects after a physician gave them a high dose of the drug as a supposed COVID-19 treatment without their knowledge. Due to these unethical practices, it's still unclear whether the drug is safe or has any benefits in the treatment or prevention of COVID-19. In summary, we have outlined the history and ethical principles and the unethical studies of ivermectin for COVID-19. Historically, events helped shape and develop ethical principles related to the protection of human research subjects. Throughout history, various unethical research practices, such as the Nazi experiments on prisoners, the Tuskegee syphilis study, and the Milgram experiment, have highlighted the need for ethical guidelines in research involving human subjects. These violations of human rights and dignity led to development of ethical principles to protect research participants. The Belmont Report and its subsequent revision of the Common Rule continues to address and adapt to changes in research methods and technology, all while upholding the principles of respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. These principles guide researchers, institutional review boards, also known as IRBs, and policymakers in safeguarding research participants. The Common Rule established in 1991 and updated in 2018, operationalized these principles into regulations governing federally funded research in the U.S. Part 46 of Title 45 and the Code of Federal Regulations breaks down and outlines these rules into sections, covering specific aspects like the informed consent and outline these rules into sections, and protections for vulnerable populations. The Common Rule applies to federally funded research, and many universities also follow it for research projects. Research on novel disease is still subjected to the exact core scientifically and ethical requirements that governs all research on human subjects. The articles we chose this week discuss the potentials of ivermectin and it's an anti-parasitic drug traditionally used for treating various parasite infections and its potential as treatment and prevention method for COVID-19. However, it highlights bias such as non-randomized participant selection and lack of blinding in studies, leading to biased outcomes. So currently, the editorials on ivermectin research for COVID-19 underscores unethically conduct such as the case data duplication, death records inaccurately, and plagiarism identified. Similar to the historical research scandals such as the Tuskegee syphilis study. Moreover, in Mexico, 200,000 residents receive ivermectin kits for COVID-19 without informed consent, raising concerns about side effects and ethicality. Despite the urgency and the challenge of addressing public health crises like the COVID-19 pandemic, research involving human subjects remains subject to the exact core scientifically and ethical requirements outlined in guidelines like the Belmont Report and the Common Rule. These guidelines include obtaining informed consent, minimizing risk, and maximizing benefits, ensuring scientific validity and promoting justice in distributing research burden and benefits. Adhering to these principles is justice in distributing research burden. Essential in maintaining the integrity, validity, and ethicality of research conducting during public health emergencies and other novel disease outbreaks. In closing, it is evident that ethical considerations are paramount in research, especially during times of crisis. By learning from the past ethical breaches and committing to ethical conduct guided by principles like those outlined in the Belmont Report and the Common Rule, we can ensure our research efforts integrity, validity, and ethicality. As we navigate through the complexity of public health emergencies and other novel disease outbreaks, we remain committed to upholding
all research participants' rights, welfare, and dignity. So for our challenge question this week, we have here listed, what are some barriers or challenges that researchers face with informed consent and autonomy? The second one is, in what way do the principles outlined in the Belmont report sometimes come into conflict with each other? How can researchers navigate these ethical dilemmas in practice? And lastly, we have, in what ways do you think COVID-19 pandemic or future novel disease led or can lead to unethical research being done?
And here's a list of our references. So this concludes the end of our presentation. We want to thank you for your time and hope you enjoyed this week's module of History and Ethical Principles. Thank you.